So, we're with Howie Roseman, the general manager of the Philadelphia Eagles, the NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles. Howie, I got to ask you two history questions that I've always wanted to ask you. Okay, number one, how could you have known when you were 9 years old you wanted to be a general manager of an NFL team?
I feel like there's Jeopardy music going on in my head. You know, I watched my first game. It was the year the Jets went to the AFC Championship game. A.J. Dewey, 2 interceptions in the Orange Bowl, pouring rain. Richard Todd quarterback. Walt Michaels was the head coach. I mean, you're gonna really call me out here? And I was hooked, and I had nobody in my family who was hooked. And so, you know, I'd go outside every day, and I thought I was gonna be the next quarterback of the Jets, and I'd play, and for some reason, my mom wouldn't let me play, you know. And listen, I wrestled at 119 pounds when I was in high school, so I get it, you know. I might go sport, yeah, and Central Jersey, and so I get that part, but I loved it. I couldn't stop obsessing about it, and I love building teams. And so, you know, when I realized I wasn't going to be an NFL quarterback, I was like, I'm going to be an NFL GM. And I used to tell people, and they just totally just like laughed me off. And I think it got me even more determined and persistent. And the world was a different place then. Now you press a button, you can connect with anyone. Unfortunately, you know, it's much easier, but it was harder to do it then. And so there was something about going in the direction of your dreams at the time, but that's a true story. I always had this in me. I never really had a different path. You know, when I got out of the University of Florida, nobody would hire me. And, you know,
did you really pester Joe Banner at the time running the Eagles?
Well, I did, but to be fair, I pestered 31 other teams. And Joe,
what are you doing? Writing them letters?
Writing letters, calling the assistants. There was no email at the time. This is even before email, you know. So it was different, you know. And the only two people who responded to me for all those years, because I started in high school and I kept doing it through college. The only people who ever responded to me were Joe, who basically said, "We don't have anything. Keep us apprised of your plans." I think that was like the direct sentence. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to keep them freaking apprised. And Mike Tannenbaum, who called me and said, "I don't have anything for you, but I'm looking through my resumes, and after every resume is you thanking me for rejecting you again." And he said, "So I'll give you a couple minutes." And so at that time, I was like, maybe I'll go get my law degree. I went to Fordham, and maybe someone will hire me to do cap, and I'll get my foot in the door, and I know I'm going to convince them to let me scout, you know. But just fortunate to be around good people.
When you get hired by the Eagles, the one interesting thing that you have said a few times is how significant Andy Reid was in your football life. Okay, so now when you look back on it, and you can now think back on the lessons you learned from Andy Reid, what would you say particularly have been big things in your football life?
Yeah, so you're talking about someone with this untraditional background, and you have this Hall of Fame coach who is willing to make you their GM, 34 years old. And, I can't tell you how much that means to me still, and how much he means to me. And the time he would spend talking to me about his philosophies, or when we would watch a player together talk to me about things that maybe I was looking at, that he was looking at different areas and made me better. And he was always teaching, he was always coaching, always teaching, not only the players, but his coaches and his staff. And, I say this like he's a first ballot Hall of Fame coach, and he would be a first ballot Hall of Fame GM if he wanted to. He's got a great perspective on how to build teams, how to evaluate players. And so, being around him was special. And I think obviously like that there are certain things that I bet, not this week, but I bet if we go to the combine and I'd say to him, like, what do you like about our team? He'd say the same things about what I like about his team, right? It starts with the lines. And he was obsessive about it, and I would hope that the people I work with on a daily basis think I'm obsessive about it.
Let's talk about that obsession, because Nick Sirianni claims to have the same obsession, your head coach. So your defensive line to me is unique in recent NFL history. Mm-hmm. You have 9 players on your defensive line who on a given day could play between 10 and 38 or 40 snaps. in a game. And, earlier in the year, Brandon Graham said, it is absolutely crazy that I am still productive at my age, having gone through everything I am. And you know why I am? Because they're using me in the right way.
Yeah, well, he's selling himself short. He is a phenomenal player with
He is.
phenomenal physical ability and phenomenal work ethic.
You don't want to be playing him in his 13th year,
Right.
52 snaps a game.
Right.
But, okay, so how did you arrive with this team figuring that we were going to play a lot of guys, probably less snaps on average, maybe than many of them would like, but we're going to keep them fresh for 17 games?
Well, I think it goes to an overriding philosophy about making sure that not only do you have great starters on both lines, but you have great depth. And, our best teams, whether they're with Coach Reid or whether they're with Coach Peterson, and whether they're with Coach Sirianni, it's about the depth on the D-line. And that's no different than 5 years ago when we were in this position. Obviously, we got to play this game on Sunday, so I'm not declaring anything other than, it's a formula that works. And having guys who are able to stay fresh. Coach Reid will say, bring fastballs off the edge all the time, bring fastballs to the quarterback. And I think probably if you ask me the most underrated storyline of our season, I think our D-line gets a little bit underrated. They have 70 sacks on the season. I mean, that's an unbelievable number. Throughout the year, getting consistent pressure on the quarterback, changing games. It helps when we have the offense that we help, and obviously, getting the lead and making teams one-dimensional. But our D-line as a whole, 4 guys, first team in NFL history, have 4 guys with more than 10 sacks. We have a 5th guy in Fletcher Cox who had 7, and I thought Fletcher had a phenomenal year. And I think it really starts there, and it allows our linebackers to do their job. It allows our secondary to not have to cover as long when they're getting consistent pressure. And, it's been a formula that's worked for us up to this point.
Why did you make Haason Reddick such a priority early in free agency?
Yeah, Haason Reddick, I may be wrong on these numbers, but I think 26.5 sacks over 2 years. He had 8 forced fumbles over those 2 years. We had 29 sacks a year ago. And we know he can play in Philly. He's from Camden. Home games were played for Temple. Home games at Lincoln Financial Field. And he just all the work we did, all the research we did on him was just like, this guy fits. This guy fits. And I thought it was our number one priority going into free agency. And we really felt like we had to get him.
I want to ask you one question about Jalen Hurts, because I think, and not in any way that I knew anything at all, but I loved the pick of Jalen Hurts in 2020. And the reason I loved it is not because you're bringing Jalen Hurts to take Carson Wentz's job. That was never why you drafted Jalen Hurts. You draft Jalen Hurts because, for a few reasons, but one of which was you really wanted a good backup quarterback, a building backup quarterback that you didn't have to pay $8 or $10 million to, and a guy who had a different skill set, who can play the game a little bit differently, and is going to be a tough guy for defenses to stop. Think back to when you were scouting Jalen Hurts, and what really put you over the top with him.
Yeah, the resiliency, the overcoming the adversity and continuing to grow from it. And, when you think about it, just his career, he comes in, he was a 4-star recruit at the University of Alabama, number 1 dual threat quarterback in the country, wins SEC Offensive Player of the Year, wins SEC Freshman of the Year, goes to the national championship game, comes back the next year, right, gets benched, stays. I can relate to staying, right? And tries to learn and tries to get better, and goes to Oklahoma as a Heisman Trophy finalist. And he had just this will to be great, this determination, and he had the skill set to do it. And I think back to that pick, and it was hard. The reception was hard for us, though. It was, we were paying backup quarterbacks. No team in the NFL since I've been in the NFL has benefited more from the backup quarterback position than the Philadelphia Eagles. And we felt like we had to get back to grooming one, and we love Jalen's skill set. Coach Peterson deserves a lot of credit for that too. He was on board with it from the outset. We had played in 6 playoff games at that time. Carson hadn't played more than a few plays in it, and we knew that it was too important. And at the end of the day, whoever we were going to pick at the end of the second round, if we hit on them, would they have the same impact if we hit on Jalen? And we knew the answer to that, and we knew we really liked Jalen. And so I'm not sure that probably we thought the feedback it was going to be that aggressive. I don't know that would have affected it.
Why it was ridiculous? Here's the real reason why it was ridiculous. If you look at NFL history, once every 2 or 3 seasons, a great team needs a backup quarterback to save its season.
Right.
Happens all the time. And you have a choice. If you want to leave yourself, and again, have nothing to do with this 49ers thing is weird because they had so many quarterbacks this
for sure.
year. But unfortunately, they had to go to Josh Johnson in a championship game, even though that's not the same thing, obviously. But you treated the backup quarterback like he's one of the 10 most important players on your team. Because if you need him, he is.
There's no doubt.
One of the 10
There's not,
most
and we had needed one, including playing in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And we had been through so many playoff games. I go back, and we played in 2003 in the championship game. Donovan McNabb got hurt. Coy Detmer came in. In 2006, Jeff Garcia took us. In 2010, Vic took us after Kevin Kolb. Nick Foles in 2012 took over for Michael Vick. Obviously Nick came back in 17 and did that. And we came back in 18. Nick came back and played in the playoffs. 19, Josh McCown's playing in the playoffs. So, to me, with our experiences, how couldn't we do something like that? And, it's ironic because I think we picked him 56. Did we pick him 56? I don't know if I remember that right. But let's just say we traded back and took him at the beginning of the 3rd round. I actually think there would have been a different conversation just because you take him at the end of 2nd versus if you take 1 and 3. And, I'm very fortunate to work with an owner who gets the big picture. And, he's okay with not winning the initial press conference and doing the right thing.
Okay, I got 2 other things to ask.
Sure.
One is, you are famous, you and Jeffrey Lurie are famous for the length and the involved coaching interviews that you do. 9, 10, 11 hours, however long they are. They're long, okay? And I wonder, when you interviewed Nick Sirianni, it wasn't like he came out of left field. It wasn't like it was an Andy Reid hire in 99. That one came out of left field. Sirianni was a well-respected guy. But tell me, in your long fact-finding about Nick Sirianni, what caused you to say to Jeffrey Lurie, I think this is our guy?
Well, he deserves a lot of credit too, because at the end of the day, he's making the hire, and he goes with, he's done unbelievable. Everyone he's hired wins divisions and ends up doing really well. But I think for us, it was a unique circumstance because obviously with Coach Peterson, we had made the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years, including winning a championship. It wasn't like the day after the season. It was after a series of meetings that they had. So we started a little late. And so, our kind of marching orders to our staff was, listen, we understand that a lot of these coaches are probably already hired. They're probably down a direction after a week of these interviews. Let's look at it like, if we were a year from now, who do we think would be the best candidates? We got first pick at next year's hottest candidates. And, sometimes things just happen and you remember them. And I remember when Frank was going to interview for Indy, and I said, who's going to be your offense coordinator? And he said, I've been telling you about Nick Sirianni, my wide receiver coach of the Chargers. And he says it just like this, and he goes, and I'm just telling you, he's the best coach I've ever been around. And that's who I'm hiring. And I remember thinking at the time, man, Frank, we had just hired Frank, quarterback. We had hired our quarterback, Coach Peterson, quarterback. And I'm going, all right, he's kind of hiring this receiver. And he was so adamant about that. And when we would talk to people from Indianapolis, they go, man, this guy's unbelievable. Like, he's a heck of a coach. But I always remembered Frank saying that. And we brought him in, and he was with his family on vacation in Fort Lauderdale, so he comes in this white minivan. A lot of swag in that. And really, like, he's like, I don't got a suit or anything. And I was like, that's awesome. None of us will dress up either. It's great. And he came in, he had jeans and like this like little pullover, and we just started talking, and we'd ask him a question, and he'd coach us up. He'd talk to us. We'd say, hey, talk to us about quarterback play. What are you looking for in quarterback play? We know you've had different kind of quarterbacks. And he'd get up and he'd show us, and you felt like, shoot, we couldn't, but maybe I could go play right now, because of how he's doing it. And he had this infectious personality, but it came with knowledge and presence, and the things he believed in. Just like talking about offensive and defensive line, it was aligned with what our values were in building a football team. And, obviously he's done a phenomenal job. When you talk about the interviews being long, it's a weird process, because it's like, I'm married. I dated my wife for 2 years. We had a year and got 3 years, right? 3 years. Well, you basically got to marry someone after interviewing, I don't know, twice and spending this amount of time with them. It's tough, and you got to be right, and you got to see through. Like, you think of those first couple of dates, whenever you go out with someone, everyone's on their best behavior, right? And you don't really know, just like you don't know in a relationship, you don't really know until you face adversity. And that's always the question: how's someone going to face adversity? And I think, what
did you see in him?
I think Coach Reid and Coach Peterson, they were so consistent every day, and so you don't know until you go through something. And when we went 2-5 and we came back from Vegas, I remember our security guy Dom DeSandro, who's like, he's not our security guy, he's like the assistant to the GM, like everything we do, everything. He's unbelievable. And I remember, getting on that plane to Vegas and like walking out as we were waiting for it to be loaded, and turning to him and going, oh my God, like, where are we right now? Like, we're freaking 2-5 in Vegas. And I go to the front of the plane, I see Nick, and he goes, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, he's like, we got a long way to go. We're going to be all right. And I was like, we're going to be all right, And that was the moment for me. And we rolled off, obviously I think 7 of our next 8 and made a run. And I think that was the moment for me where I said, yeah, he's going to be really good,
If whatever happens on Sunday, at some point in the next week or so, somebody at Wharton calls you and says, we'd love you to deliver a lecture to our MBA class. And the topic of the lecture that we'd like you to talk about to these young, impressionable people is what is really important to be a good general manager in the NFL. If you were given that assignment to talk to really smart people, what would you talk about?
I think it's no different than being great in, I've never been in any other field, so I'd say in any other field, or being a great player. You have to be resilient. You have to understand that things are going to happen that you don't want to happen. You're going to make mistakes. It's how you overcome them, how you kind of make sure that you're continually learning, continuing to get better, having as many good people around you as possible. We've had phenomenal people here at every level that allow me to do my job better, because I don't have to worry about them doing their job. So surrounding yourself with the best of the best, being able to admit your mistakes, and not being so prideful that you can't see it, because I think that affects your culture more than anything else, is when everyone knows you've made a mistake, and then they feel like, hey, he's just hanging on to this for himself as opposed to what's right for the team. And being relentless, being determined. I think that when you're passionate about something and you get to go to work every day. Every day I drive through those gates, I feel lucky to be part of this, and I don't take it for granted. One day, 1 minute, and obviously our fans don't let me do that anyway, so I don't know that that's an option. But I think that when you do all those things, when you're passionate about what you do, when you're able to continue to learn and get better, when you understand you're going to make mistakes, but when you compound them by not admitting your mistakes and learning from them, and then you surround yourself by great people, you have a chance to have success in any field.
Howie Roseman, thanks a lot. Good luck in the game.
Thanks, Peter.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.